Welcome to the planevents.ca podcast. Today is October 31st, 2020. It's Halloween. Happy Halloween to those listening. And this is your host, Kamran. In today's episode, I have two of our guests on, Sundeep and Sharath. They recently, I think in September, they can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think in September, the two of them had gotten married. And coming from the LGBTQIA plus community, I think there were a lot of challenges and obstacles that they overcame, and I think sounds like continue to overcome. And the Plan Events team felt like that we needed this kind of representation on our platform. Like, we need awareness about kind of the different communities in the South Asian community, the different types of experiences they have in the marriage process, especially when it's from, I think, underrepresented groups. Even within, to begin with, as a South Asian, if you're in North America, you're generally underrepresented, and then even within your own community, you could be further underrepresented. So we're going to talk about, a little bit about the two of them, how they met, what were their experiences like coming out. So this is, before that they met. How did they, get married? How was the marriage received by their family, religious institutions, and also the general public? So with that said, I'm going to hand off to Sundeep and Sharath so that the two of them can introduce themselves, so that the listeners can get a sense of who we're speaking with. Sundeep and Sharath, do you want to go ahead and do your intros?
Sure. My name is Sundeep Dosanjh. I am a proud member of the LGBTQIA plus community. I am a very proud Sikh Punjabi American born citizen that cherishes the Indian culture, and I am honored to have found my life partner and participate in two groundbreaking traditional Indian ceremonies.
Awesome.
Um,
Thank
okay, I'm Sharath Puttichanda, and much like my husband, I too am a proud member of the LGBTQIA plus community, and it's been an absolute honor to have met, fallen in love with Sandeep. I am from the southern part of India, ethnically speaking. I belong to the Kodava community from Coorg. I was born in India, but my life journey took me to the Middle East, New York, Rhode Island, and then finally now to California, where I just moved to be with my husband. And I too, just like Sandeep said, I'm very, very proud to have had two beautiful ceremonies that showcased both parts of our cultures and the coming together, more importantly, of both those cultures and celebrating love and oneness and equality.
Awesome. Thank you. Yeah. And just for some context, Sharath literally moved into his new permanent home like 5 hours ago. So I really appreciate both of you making the time to come on to this pod. And a couple things I wanted to clarify for our listeners. Can you, one of you, articulate what does LGBTQIA plus, what does that stand for?
So it's a great question. So a lot of people see it and they just don't get it. They hear LGBT, and then they see QIA plus, and they don't necessarily understand it. But it means lesbian, gay, bisexual, pansexual, transgender, genderqueer, queer, intersex, agender, asexual, and ally community. So
Got it.
the plus stands for any other way that members of the community identify as. And, personally, for me, being part of a community that welcomes and embraces any person that, is looking for a family, it really speaks to what all humans want in life.
Totally, like relationships and social acceptance, and to just be
Absolutely.
part of a broader community.
Exactly.
Thank you. And then I kind of have my second question. This is coming from a place of being a nerd, so I don't want to spend too much time on it. But Sharath, can you tell us a little bit about like who are people of the Kodava community? I know you mentioned Southern India, but are they typically associated with a particular state? Are they across multiple states, like many communities in the subcontinent are? And what religion do you identify with as it relates to it sounds like you have two ceremonies, so the ceremony from your end?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I think the Kodava, the word Kodava, the place Kurg, wasn't or isn't, I should say, something that people, if people are from India, it's not an easy place to kind of pick on the Indian map. So Coorg is actually in the southern state of Karnataka, and the Kodavas, or the Coorgs, are uniquely only from that region. So they aren't spread across different states or across the country. They're only from Coorg. It's famously known as the Scotland of India. It's a hill station. It's a beautiful, beautiful region that's filled with a lot of coffee estates. So coffee is like a primary crop in Coorg, and the Coorgs or Kodavas are primarily a martial, tribal, ethno-lingual community. There are all sorts of theories on what the history behind the Coorgs is, but they are a very unique population in southern India. There's only a handful of us left in the world. So that's what's unique to Coorg. As far as religion goes, the Kodavas are worshippers of nature and ancestors. So the ceremony that we had, or any ceremony of significance in Coorg, very much has to do with invoking the blessings of the ancestors, and the goddess Kaveri, which is the Kaveri is the primary river or the life force that flows through Coorg. So it's a very unique set of customs, very unique set of traditions. And for all the reasons that I've described, you can hear the pride in my voice as to why I think Coorg and Kodavas are just such beautiful, welcoming, open-minded people. And I think tying that back into why we wanted to highlight that for both our cultures was exactly because of what I've described. So that, in a nutshell, is who the Coorgs, the Kodavas are, what they're about, what the land looks like, and who they identify as from a religious perspective.
Got it. That makes sense. And I have like one last question. I'll try to make it quick. So,
Sure.
are the Kodavas? You know how there's essentially like, I think throughout like various parts of India, like central,
Mhm.
southern. There's various. I won't call them. I don't know what to call them, but they're basically like the language they speak has no affinity with the Northern Indian languages nor the Southern Indian languages.
That
Are
is
they?
correct.
Okay. So they're like, it's like they kind of, that community could have very well like pre-existed before like many of the, I guess, let's say like I don't want to say modern, but like newer uh inhabitants of like essentially all of India, like southern, northern alike. Is that
Yeah, you're kind of correct about that. The Kurgs speak a language known as Kodavatak, which literally translates to the Kodava language, or sometimes colloquially known as Kurgi. So it does not. It has some vague similarities to some South Indian languages. By virtue of being in South India, a lot of the language is influenced by neighboring states like Kerala, or it's in the state of Karnataka, so Kannada itself. As far as the origin of the Kodavas or the Kurgs go, they are a very unique set of people in southern India. The clothes they wear, the jewelry, the weaponry is very much a part of traditional Kurg wear. So, the sword. It's also an agricultural and hunting community. So the origin is debatable. There's a lot of theories of whether it was Mediterranean in origin and then people migrated to southern India. So there are a lot of different theories on how they originated, but they are very unique in that the language, the clothes, the food, all of it is very unique, and does not share any similarity even with the surrounding areas in southern India.
That's so cool. I think I'm kind of a nerd about that, but I won't nerd out with the audience too much longer. So I will bring it back into your marriage. So can the two of you, share how both of you met? I mean, I've heard stories. It sounds like a very modern way to meet. I'm thinking the two of you could kind of one or the both of you could speak to that.
Yeah, I'll speak to it. So I was traveling in Machu Picchu, Peru, and I took a picture and I posted it on Instagram. And around the same time, Sharath was yearning to travel, so he was just combing Instagram, looking at travel pictures, and he was looking at pictures of Peru. Coincidentally, his neighbor was also the same time period that I was. So he was looking at pictures and he came across my picture I posted, and he was intrigued by the elements in that picture. And then he decided to click on my profile, and I guess he became more intrigued. Um, and then fast forward a couple weeks later, I was in Seattle, coincidentally, and I had a bad experience with the Lyft driver, inappropriate, racist comment to me, and I was pretty irritated. So I didn't respond to him or answer his question. I posted it on Instagram. And then Sharath felt compelled to answer, and he shot back a heated response in support of my experience, and shared his own experience. And I was intrigued, and I clicked on his profile, and I was intrigued. And then I followed back because he's been following me since I was in Peru. And then we started chatting, and then a few days later he asked for my phone number, and we started texting and talking on the phone. And he went on a trip to New York City that weekend, a few days after we first started chatting, and he would FaceTime me, and we had our third FaceTime date, and I said, "So I don't know what's going on here, but I can't move out of Northern California, uh, mostly because of family obligations, being the only son and family." And he said, "I have nothing." So at that moment, I literally did, and we had our first in-person date on February 20th. But before that was Valentine's Day, so I sent a bouquet of flowers to his emergency room because he is an ER doctor with the focused in psychiatry, and he is mad at me now that I even mentioned. So I sent a bouquet of flowers to the ER, and it was a surprise, and everyone was all giddy because Sharath received a bouquet of flowers, and no one knew who it was from except for the very close people that he shared that he was chatting with this guy in California from Instagram when he slid into his DMs. So he was very emotional once he received the flowers. And then later that same day, we had our first virtual date, and he went to Cheesecake Factory PF Chang's in Providence, Rhode Island, and I went to PF Chang's here in Sacramento. So with the time difference, we had to make sure that we made it in time for the East Coast time. But also we wanted to share the same menu, even though we were more than 3,000 miles. So we had first date conversations, and then a week later we had our second date at the Cheesecake Factory and had second date conversations. And then a few days after that, we had our 10-day date where I met him at baggage claim in person at SFO, San Francisco International Airport. Picked him up, and then we started our 10-day date in San Francisco, and then he came to Sacramento, met my siblings, and then we drove down to the coast to Carmel, and then we ended our 10-day date and immediately made plans for March. But COVID hit, so we had to adjust our plans, and instead he wore full PPE flying back and forth to Sacramento, where we were quarantined in a hotel at least 1 to 2 times a month for 4 to 5 days each time. So we were getting to know each other throughout the shelter-in-place orders. And I proposed on May 24th on the beach with the Golden Gate Bridge in the backdrop. Had 2 photographers snapping all the pictures, and he had no idea. And he said yes.
That's awesome. Wow, that's really in depth. Thank you for sharing that. That's really neat. I think it's first off, I have like 2 comments. I think it's cool that you were able to kind of really make things work virtually, and then throughout the pandemic. And then the second thing is kind of a side note. I think I've never been to the PF Chang's in Providence, but I have been to Providence once in my life. And I just remember Providence having like one shopping center where they had like Cheesecake Factory and a couple other nice restaurants.
The mall, the Providence Place Mall.
Yeah, is that where that PF Chang's is?
That is where the PF Chang's is. Yes.
That's so funny. Nice. That's awesome. So can you share, I mean, it sounds like proposed in May and then got married in September. What was but before we jump into the wedding, I kind of want to step back a little bit, and I want to understand, what were your individual experiences like coming out, right? Like some people might wait till they are in college to tell their parents and family. Some might tell them earlier. Like for each of you, what were those? When did you come out to your immediate family, like your parents, and what did that look like for the 2 of you?
Wow, that is a trip down memory lane. So for me, I think the way that my life trajectory flowed. I was born in southern India, and I was raised by my grandparents for the first several years of my life. And my parents were in the Middle East, in Muscat, Oman, and I joined them later. I mean, I think that when I was 13, 14, I'd begun, knowing that that I was gay, that I was attracted to men, and that it was, as is the experience with a lot of people in the community, there's an incredible amount of guilt and shame associated with it. There's an incredible amount of fear. I did not talk about it with anyone. I held it all in, and my experience growing up during my early years in southern India and the Middle East was that, people around you, even your closest friends, got hints, or you hinted at it, but it very much is this culture of pretending like it doesn't exist. So if it doesn't exist and you don't acknowledge it, then you don't have to talk about it. So I think very much for me, that became the norm. I would feel it, I would know it in my heart of hearts, but I just learned to quash it. I learned not to talk about it. I learned not to bring it up, and that it would, you kind of almost delude yourself into thinking this is not going to be an issue. I'm going to get over it. Eventually, you realize that no, it's not going anywhere. It's very much at the core of who you are. It is not all of who you are, but it is an important, piece of who you are. And as I came into that realization, I think I was fiercely outspoken through my later years in college, which would be 11th and 12th grade, in boarding school in India, and then in medical school. But eventually I formally came out to my parents at the end of medical school. So I was 20, 23, 24. But, I had to carve out a path for myself after I came out. So, I grew up a lot away from home. So one of the things that I did, I say it, lightly now, but, I fled as soon as I came out, right? So I spoke my truth and I just left, not knowing what that would look like, and not knowing what the future would hold. And then that's how I ended up in residency in New York. And I think that finally kind of living in New York was when I came into my own, and that I could actually say it out aloud, that I could actually utter the words, I am gay, and that there is nothing wrong with it, and that I am a gay man, and that there's nothing wrong with it, that I'm gay and I'm Indian, and there's nothing wrong with it, and all of those things. That then involved, several conversations with my parents. Obviously, my extended family, my brother, my cousins. I think a lot of it, it was me having to overcome my own insecurities and inhibitions about what people would think of me. I think for people of my generation and my siblings, extended family, it hasn't been an issue at all. Obviously, for my parents, it took a while to navigate getting them to talk about it, or being able to talk about it, being able to explain to them why there's distance, why I left. But all of that has come full circle now, and both our families, I can speak for my family, I think Sundeep will speak for his, but we both feel it from both our families. It's come full circle now to the point where my mom and dad are fiercely protective and defensive of us with everything that has happened. So it takes, every time I hear that, it takes a moment for me to sit back and realize, wow, this journey has literally been all of my late teens, all of my 20s, a good part of my 30s to now. And I guess that's the kind of work, that's the kind of process that has gone into it. But somewhere, you realize, this is me, this is my truth, this is who I am. There is nowhere else to be, and I cannot be anyone else. I cannot offer any other defense or argument except the fact that I am a gay man, and you stick by that, and you drive home that point in as many different ways as possible, I guess. so that was my coming out, notwithstanding all the bullying and the shaming and the teasing and the pranks through school and college that you endure. um, you know um, Somehow I don't have a formula in the book, but I'm here talking about it. um, I guess just reiterating the fact that a simple sentence like "it will get better" truly means it will get better. uh, so that's been my coming out journey and story.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing. Sandeep, what was your experience like?
So I think a huge part of it involves coming out to yourself. I came out to myself when I was about 15. Um, I didn't know what my family or my close group of friends make of it. Um, I had figured out that if the worst case scenario of being exiled by the family would become true, then I had to make sure that I was at a place where I could be self sufficient. Um, so I didn't come out to my sisters until October 2010. Uh, no, October 2009. So, what is that?
11 years.
Yeah, thanks. I failed that. And then I came out to my best friend um, a month later, and then I was living in San Francisco for work for a few years, and I was out at my job there, and during that time I was in a relationship, and that was my first relationship with a man, and I decided I'm like, okay, the Supreme Court just ruled that Proposition 8 was not legal, so they tossed it out. Therefore, the Supreme Court was on the side of same sex marriage. So I used that as well as um, my relationship at the time and wanting to have it done by the age of 30 as motivators to come out to both of my parents. Um, it took my dad a little while to um, come to terms with it. His love and support for me never changed. Same thing with my mom. It literally took her 15 hours when she was back to normal with me. It just was like the initial, like, oh. And I mean, it's a mindset change and, the hopes and dreams that parents have for their kids. And it does change. And then when I introduced them to Sharath, um, I think it really hit home to my dad that okay, um, this must be the person that my son will marry, um, because Sharath kept coming around during while we were like socially distantly seeing some family when Sharath was able to come visit me. So and they love him. They loved him since day one. And then during the wedding ceremony, my dad played a very active role in making sure that we knew that he and my mom supported our marriage. And um, we got creative and we made sure that it was virtually being aired for Sharath's family in India so they could watch it. And his parents both watched it and, they were very supportive of it. So, it's been a huge relief that my worst case scenario idea never materialized. Um, and looking back, it probably was me just being super worried because it's a fear that a lot of members of the LGBTQIA plus community have, but it's a big fear that members of the LGBTQIA plus that are of Indian descent have and live every single day. So I didn't know what was going to come out of coming out. And I'm grateful and relieved nothing has changed since.
That's awesome. So if I'm understanding correctly, it seems like the marriage itself was not like a surprise, because it seems like both of you had come out to your parents like way before, uh you know individually, by asserting your identities. Is that a fair assessment?
Yeah.
For Sharath, yeah, but for me, I would jokingly say, Mom, why don't you go find me a good Indian boy to get married to, to go in line with, the traditions of setting up an arranged marriage. My parents are not that way with their kids. They never arranged our marriages. Um, but my mom just gave me this look, like having a traditional wedding ceremony is just not a thing for same-sex couples. Um, and she never said it, but and that was initially a couple months right after I came out to her, that look. But obviously, her mindset has evolved over the years, but also when I, expressed our wishes of wanting to have traditional Indian ceremonies because it's who we are, but also I'm a Sikh Punjabi man, and for me, going to a wedding is, involves, the traditions of being Punjabi. The same thing with our own weddings. We wanted our own traditions showcased during our wedding ceremonies that we've attended our whole entire life. So we made sure that we followed all of the rituals, and but it was, it took a lot of research to make sure that we were able to do as much as possible, um, and take into account the U.S. Customs um, headaches with getting things shipped from India, um, but it was all worth it.
That's awesome. That kind of brings me to my next point, which is around the so we have a sense of like how the family received the marriage. I was curious about, what about the religious institutions? For example, I was speaking for myself. I'm Muslim by identity, and my fiance is Sikh. So early discussions, my parents were like, well, not my parents, my mom. My dad's not religious at all, but my mom was like, yeah, like, the marriage has to happen between two Muslims and yada yada. And we found somebody that'll be able to do the officiation, like, because technically any Muslim can do the officiation, and really whether they were willing to do it with an interfaith couple is really, I think, from what I understand, up to their discretion. So that there's that one thing. And then from my fiance's side, she had to find a place that already does interfaith ceremonies, because those are the ones that would be open to doing it, because there certainly are um some community, like some Sikh communities, where the temple might not be willing to officiate an interfaith
You're right.
ceremony. So, and that's just interfaith, right? This is not we're not even bringing gender or your orientation into the picture. So I'd be curious, like, what was both your experiences like?
I asked my dad to find a baiji or a priest to conduct our ceremony, and he never said it to me, but I could see it in his eyes that he was concerned of being turned down and not being able to make our wish of having a traditional Punjabi ceremony possible. So, you know, I saw that look in his eyes of concern and worry. So I started doing research, and I remember attending destination Sikh weddings for family members in Cancun. So I reached out to one of them and I asked, I'm like, hey, how did you do that? I got the contact information and I pitched our wedding to the priest, and I hope that we wouldn't be turned down because it is a same-sex marriage ceremony, and we weren't. And then they said, why would you ever feel that you have to beg a priest to conduct a wedding ceremony between two humans? And it sold it. I was like, you're absolutely right. Can we please confirm? So, but I mean, it's so true though. Like, there's a lot of dissenters, there's fundamentalists, there's every type of person in every religion. But when it comes down to it, people forget that we're all part of the human race. And that's the only thing that should matter. Everything else is secondary. But people don't think that way. Instead, they hone in and they dig their feet down, and it's just that's where the conflict starts. That's where the discrimination starts. And you know, people from you know people have been dealing with discrimination for their whole entire existence. So why are we having inner discrimination when we should just be embracing each other and picking each other up?
Yeah, I totally agree, and I think I might know which priest or ministry you might be speaking of, because I think there's like at least one resort in Cancun called, I think, Moon Palace, and they literally have like, yeah, we do Sikh ceremonies, and there's like one guy that everybody uses. So I'm curious. I mean, we probably won't know the answer here, but I'm really curious to know if it's the same person. But that's really cool that worked out. Um, Sharath, what sounds like, you know, both you also had a ceremony to represent, you know, your identity, the Kodava identity. Were there any? What was your experience like? You know, when you had proposed that you want to have a ceremony for you and Sundeep.
Um, so what I thought it would be and how it would be welcomed and what happened after was I had never fathomed. But again, like everything, it came full circle. So for the Kodava ceremony, one of the uniqueness of the Kodava ceremony is that we do not, there is no religious head present. So in other words, there is no priest, there is no, officiant that conducts the wedding. So the mother, the female head of the household, as well as elders in the family and worshiping the goddess Kaveri and your ancestors is what constitutes the sanctity of the marriage. So one step was that we didn't require a priest, just because Kodava weddings in general don't require a priest. My brother and sister-in-law, my younger brother and sister-in-law, were very much from the get-go on board 100%. Of course, COVID hit and several other political immigration issues hit in the second half of this year, and neither my brother nor my sister-in-law, who were in India at the time and stuck, but who frequently traveled to the United States, they couldn't travel. They then, without a question, started looking around for all the traditional, everything from the clothing and the jewelry to things that we would use in the marriage and the ceremony in India to ship it, making appointments in the midst of COVID, getting us, ideas, and genuinely being excited by it. So was my extended family, my cousins. So my dad's brother's son and his wife, so my cousin, brother, and sister-in-law, ended up actually officiating, conducting the Kurgi ceremony and the Kurgi part of the wedding. And I've said this often to Sundeep, to kind of see it all come together like that, to see my family and Sundeep's family all in the same home, trying to put these things together, trying to make the ceremony happen, looking for how do we, with what we have and what we can have, how do we best retain the spirit of a Kodava Kurg ceremony and wedding? That was what we led with, and again, we were very proud of the fact that we were able to pull off both ceremonies with as much detail as possible, given COVID, given the constraints of whether or not we could have all the items for the wedding delivered on time, and all of that. What happened after was exactly what Sundeep was describing. The news hit the Kodava community and southern India, and I guess all of India at this point. And a political figurehead who's the president of one of the Kodava associations in the capital, which is in the capital city of Coorg, which is the district in Karnataka, put out a statement saying, this is blasphemy, and we did not condone this, and that I should be ostracized from the family, and that I should lose my last name, and that he was going to write a letter to the North American Kodava association asking that I be extricated from things here. So these were things that we never, yes, you expect, opinions. Yes, you expect, people who will complain, but did not expect that level of difference of opinion,
So just to backtrack a little bit, right before our wedding, I pitched the local TV station here, and before Sharath and I decided to move forward with inviting them, we thought about it, and we invited the media to raise awareness of a same-sex marriage, but a same-sex marriage with two traditional Indian ceremonies. And we knew that if we did this, it will go big. And we weren't doing it for us. Sure, having media coverage for any of your events is cool, but we were doing this to really show the members of the Indian community that are still struggling to live their truth into the closet, that it does get better, like Sharath said earlier, but also that anything is possible. And if they can't see representation of who they are in the media or on the internet, then it's really lonely, and it's really hard to find reasons to continue to live. Suicide is very high in the LGBTQIA plus community, and a lot of people don't talk about that, but having representation matters. So we knew it would go big. And then the day before our wedding ceremony, we had the New York Times call us and interview both of us 1 hour each. And we were featured in the New York Times for our wedding. And the wedding news story from the local TV station went viral. It was picked up and it was covered and posted on the internet, and people in the UK saw it, Canada saw it, all across the country, here in the US, and also India and Australia. We've gotten a lot of a lot of positive responses and dissenters. Majority of them were positive. And then after that, we had our 6-minute video highlight that we posted, and that went viral another round. And we got a lot of media coverage in India with newspapers covering what the politician said, and then we had journalists contacting us wanting to get our side. And Shrath and I have been getting picked on and being bullied since we were born, and it's not easy. And we're used to the bullying and the discriminatory practices that society has placed against LGBTQIA plus community members, and we're used to it. But the people that are still struggling, they need to see people aren't afraid of the backlash of living their truth. So that's why we invited the media, and that's why we welcome the discussions with the media outlets that reached out to us, because it's important. It's important to let people know that we are just like them.
Yeah, I think the general thing is, I mean, you can let me know if you disagree, but I think people need role models, and if somebody identifies a certain way and they don't see somebody that looks like them or thinks like them, out there, taking a stand and like living their own truth, then yeah, it's I can see that's lonely. So I think it totally makes sense, and I think, I mean, that was a key reason why we brought the two of you on, because I think you'll get one swath of society by being on like a primary American media outlet. You'll get another by being on various Indian media outlets. But I personally think it's important to get the cross section of South Asians in North America, because the homophobia, from what I've seen, it's still acceptable. It's still an acceptable type of behavior, attitude to have. I'm sure the both of you have seen it within the communities here, and so that's why I thought it was appropriate. It is appropriate, to share your story on this platform. So it makes sense, and I think you were able to speak to how the general public received the news, and so I think definitely insightful. So before we bring this podcast episode to a close, do either of you have any words you absolutely want people to hear that you'd like to share here before we bring this to an end?
I think you brought up a very, very relevant point. And as I was talking about both the ceremonies, you talked about how people need to see people who look like them, who are them, be represented. And I think that I am wholeheartedly on the same page with Sundeep, and why we're having this discussion in the first place is that really was simply our endeavor, was to, yes, of course, celebrate our love and share that with our family and friends who have we cannot be more grateful for all their support and love. But I think what this has also shown us is, despite the dissenters, despite the loudness of the negativity, what we've felt is the support of the majority. It may not have been as loud as the naysayers, it may not have been as loud as the dissenters, but the number of, just the sheer outpouring, both from the Sikh community as well as the Kodava community, people who we do not even know, talking to us and sharing their personal stories, telling us that they support us. That's the world we imagine. It's not because we need it, but that's the goodness that we need to kind of start believing in again. When we say, or when we utter phrases like "love is love" and "love always wins," and we're all created equal. I think this journey for us and this experience for us has become even more sacred because we've lived it. We've seen And I'd just like to say kudos and more power to all of these people from across the world that have reached out to us. You folks really proved us right in why we decided to do this. And to all those who are still living in the shadows, who are still struggling to be their true selves, continue being your true self, and I just hope that this little endeavor by us has a far-reaching effect in being able to offer that courage, offer that hope, and just simply let people live their truths and be themselves.
Yeah, I would add that it's really difficult for Sharath and I to fathom the phrase role model being attached to us. It's kind of uncomfortable. But I don't know, maybe people do see us as role models, but to us, we're just normal people. We didn't do anything um, that we didn't believe in, but we thought it was very important to share our experience with the world, just so people know that they're not alone, and that anything that they want to make happen can happen on their own timeline. And at the end of the day, history proves that it's inevitable that same-sex marriages will, be accepted globally. India gained their independence. Same-sex marriages will gain acceptance.
I agree. Totally. Yeah, if anybody has questions for either of you, I don't want to flood your inboxes. Would you be
Oh, it's
open?
been flooded. Don't you worry.
I don't want to add to the flood, but if anybody has questions or anything like that, do you have any resources you recommend, or are you open to people just reaching out to you on some sort of medium like Instagram or anything like that?
Yeah, people could
Yeah.
definitely reach out to me on Instagram. We're pretty receptive to responding
Okay.
to positive people or people that need some support.
Of course. Okay. Awesome. So I'll include I think I'll include both your Instagram handles if that's fine with you. And yeah, if anybody that's listening, you need somebody to talk to, you're in a similar situation, or somebody that can um benefit from speaking to Sundeep or Sharath,
Yeah.
take a peep at the episode notes and reach out to them.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, I really appreciate both of you coming on. I hope Sharath, your first day, first Halloween, first everything in California, it seems like, is the beginning of an amazing journey. And same for you, Sandeep.
Thank you.
Thank you
for
so
having us.
much.
Thank you. You two have a good evening.
Thanks. You too.
Bye.
Bye.